Welcome to this live platform stream, and I know it's very early in the morning. You'll probably be watching this pre-recorded later in the day. But I've got up early this morning because I got the opportunity yesterday to reach out to and connect with someone who is doing, I guess, what many journalists would say is the most romantic of jobs. I think it is the most challenging and the most courageous of jobs, actually covering a war. The person we're going to talk to this morning is Simon Townsley. He's a Wellingtonian. He is on assignment for the Telegraph Group, currently in Odessa on the Black Sea in Ukraine. As I said, a Wellingtonian, though a highly awarded and recognised international photojournalist. So when someone suggested I give Simon a ring or contact him, I was more than happy to do so. For the next 20 minutes, half an hour or so, we are going to get a frontline on the ground look at what is happening in Ukraine. The biggest story, perhaps the most concerning story in the world, and perhaps the only story that has knocked for New Zealanders Omicron and COVID off the front pages. Simon Townsley joins us live now from Odessa, Ukraine. Simon, thank you for taking the time.
Simon Townsley.
Townsley.
You got it. That's all right.
We're going to have to do that all again. Too early in the morning for me. Simon, I need to ask you first, where are you talking to us from?
Yeah, so we've got a hotel here in Odessa, which is on the Black Sea coast of Ukraine.
Tell us about Odessa. It's a resort town. It's an historic town and an important strategic town.
It is very important strategically. It's the largest port that on the Black Sea, and it's the largest port that the Ukrainians have. They ship about 15% of the world's wheat production out of the Black Sea, and most of it comes out of Odessa every year. So it's critical. Yeah.
All right. So also a place, from what I read, where many believe a Russian assault, perhaps an amphibious assault, is imminent. Is that the feeling you're getting on the ground there, that you're at the next, if you like, flashpoint of this war?
It could be. I don't think it's going to be an amphibious assault alone. They have got a fleet off the coast. You can see it, and they periodically launch missiles from there, although not generally aimed at Odessa, but they have quite a reach, and so they're firing them all over the country from those ships. My understanding is that they've got a limited number of Marines on those vessels. So, Odessa is a city of about 1 million people, and I think they just simply don't have enough troops to stage an amphibious assault and hold the city without having a ground-based assault come in from the east at the same time. So, and that's on the cards completely, because they're fighting about 120 kilometers away from here to do just that.
We've seen pictures from other cities of people fleeing, if they can, out of the Ukraine, civilians fleeing. Has there been an exodus from Odessa or not?
Yeah, to some extent there has, and the president announced a couple of days ago that there was an imminent assault here, and so the family who run this hotel, a lot of them disappeared. But I would say there are more people coming out of the east than there are coming out of Odessa at the moment. It's very tense, and there's a nighttime curfew, but it's fairly quiet in terms of the exodus.
How close are you to Snake Island? Because that is one of the stories early on in this conflict. Whether for propaganda purposes or not, that was incredibly popular and spread around the world, the FU Russian warship story.
Indeed, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, relatively close. It's not too far from here. That was an interesting story. I'm not entirely sure how much of it resulted in the people on the island either being captured or killed. I'm not sure which way that went, but it's true to say that they put two fingers up to the Russians, and good on them.
All right. We've also heard reports in the last couple of days that the Russian ship involved in that, was in fact sunk or destroyed. and the people who launched missiles at that said "F you" or words to that effect.
Yeah.
Has that? Can you confirm that story? Do you believe that story? Because from here, it looks like a perfect propaganda story. And I'm a journalist. I'm skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical. It's almost too good to be true from a PR morale point of view.
I don't know if they sank it. They did hit it, and it's not terribly far off the coast, so they did hit it, and it was on fire. You could see the smoke from here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I take it that the person in the street in Ukraine takes great heart from that at a time of real difficulty, or
Oh,
stories like that.
oh, I would think so. Yeah. I mean, these are, they're nice people, but they're pretty serious and very proud people. And you don't really want to be messing around with them. They've suffered a lot at the hands of the Russians over the past 100 odd years, and particularly Stalin. So they're not about to be messed around with. I mean, there's people who've got nothing to lose. They're fighting for their homeland.
Yeah. Many of them, though, feel strong ties to Russia and have ethnic ties to Russia. Many people in Ukraine are Russian.
Yes.
Is it, when you talk to people, more an animosity towards Putin and what he might be perceived to be doing to Russia rather than Russia and what it's doing to Ukraine?
Yeah, I haven't seen any animosity directed at Russian speaking people. And a lot of the people in the hotel, a lot of people speak Russian. I mean, remember, the Russians oppressed Ukraine under the Soviet Union. You weren't allowed to speak Ukrainian. You had to speak, and you learnt Russian in schools. And so a lot of people never had the opportunity to even speak their native tongue. So people aren't attacked or vilified for speaking Russian or for having that Russian ethnicity. There are a number of Russians who feel that the West has brought this to Putin, and Putin's had to respond. But they're very much in the minority. And even the Orthodox Church here broke away some years ago from the Russian Orthodox Church and formed the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and don't, for the most part, look towards Moscow, although there are some who do, and I have met some of them.
How would you describe the morale and the attitude of those that you are interacting with in Ukraine? Are they pessimistic, realistic, optimistic?
It's really hard to know what realism looks like here. I think realistically, we'd have thought, a couple of weeks ago that the Russian army would just steamroller through here. And so the idea that they've withstood things this long has given them a great deal of hope and optimism. So, everywhere you go, people are getting armed. They've put roadblocks up outside every village. They've got checkpoints up. They are determinedly going to fight, without a doubt, if they can.
You've seen other world flashpoints and other conflicts.
Mm.
What is unique, if anything, about this? Because once again, skeptically, you look and think this will end badly. It will end with munitions and blown bodies, and one side dominating and destroying the other.
Yeah, and it's unique in the sense that, I covered, you're right, I covered the Gulf War and I covered Bosnia, and here you're facing one of the world's largest military forces, in the Gulf. It was very one-sided in favor of, the good guys. And in Bosnia, it very evenly, matched to some extent. But here, there's a country facing the Russian military, and that's a pretty terrifying prospect. I mean, it's a nuclear power, so very different. And it's a very kind of wait and see, isn't it? How far are they going to go? Well, who knows?
Simon, do Ukrainians feel abandoned by those they feel should stand up to them? A lot of talk about the no-fly zone being essentially rejected from powers in the West. I know there have been some remarkable changes with the Germans deciding to export or support military means. First time they've done that since World War II.
Yeah.
And huge economic sanctions, which New Zealand has got on board with urgent legislation in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Do the Ukrainians appreciate that support, or are they waiting for someone to send in the cavalry?
I think they do really appreciate it. And I don't think that they're not waiting for anything. They're asking for help and they're getting help. So just to touch on the no-fly zone, they are receiving anti-aircraft, mobile anti-aircraft weapons, and they're pretty effective. And they'll be receiving a lot more. So most of the damage is being done by ground-based, by shelling. A no-fly zone is really not going to have a huge impact on what goes on here because the Russians aren't really flying. I mean, we've really only seen or heard one jet come through, and that was when we were driving down here, which was quite alarming. But and then shortly after we left that area, the area was hit, and it was hit by rockets, so, and not from the air. So the Russians have lost a lot of aircraft, and they're not about to lose any more when they really don't need to. So it's missiles, it's rockets, it's shelling. That's fundamentally the biggest issue that they face. And as they receive more ground shoulder-launched missiles and mobile anti-aircraft equipment, there'll be even less of a need for a no-fly zone. So
let's be realistic too, and you mentioned it earlier, the possibility of the use of chemical or tactical nuclear weapons, which we know the Russians have. Is there a real fear of that in Ukraine? Or perhaps, I don't know, a hope that even for Putin, that would be a bridge too far?
Well, who knows? I mean, I thought the invasion of Ukraine would be a bridge too far. So, I mean, heaven knows what's going on in his mind, and what information he's receiving, and how his judgment is being affected by the kind of he appears to be kind of living in this sort of cocoon, really, and whether he's getting accurate information, who knows? So, there is a fear here, particularly today, not so much about nuclear weapons, although the nuclear reactors are compromised in the sense that they're not, two of them aren't in control of the Ukrainians. But there is a fear about chemical and biological weapons being used, particularly after British and American intelligence announced their concern over that. So yeah, there's a real worry, and there's a worry that there'll be a false flag attack using chemical weapons, which will then allow the Russians to respond more intensively, and so who knows, Yeah.
Simon, what's it like operating as a journalist, a foreign journalist in Ukraine at the moment? We've seen some sky footage of one of their crews coming under what looked like to be targeted sniper attack. They talked about a death squad, but certainly, boy, as an operational journalist, it was scary stuff that I saw. And you've got some experience. How would you compare it to other war zones you've been in, and what are the particular challenges of operating in Ukraine right now?
Yeah, well, there are two challenges, really. One is dealing with sort of imminent attack from the Russians and being shot up by them. And the other one is just being able to do your job as a journalist when you're working with the Ukrainians, who are very sensitive about you divulging sort of secrets. And so it's quite hard. And you in order to get here, we had to, we drove in from Lviv. It took a couple of days. We went through a dozen different checkpoints. We have to show you papers and open the car up and they search it, and they're all very jumpy. Even today, I was out looking, and just wandering around shooting in a village about 100 kilometers out of here, and the police came and made sure that we were doing the right thing and then hurried us along. So it's quite hard, being able to function and gaining that trust. And of course, they're very worried about a kind of fifth column. And, there are a lot of Russian speakers and a lot of Russians who may well kind of sympathize and act as spies. So, they want to make sure that they keep you under control. I mean, the joke of a lot of it is that, a lot of this information is sort of available through satellite imagery, and they really don't need people on the ground to tell them where the tanks are parked.
Yeah. Well, we've heard also that the Russians are having to use like civilian cell phone networks for battlefield communications because their gear isn't up to it, which allows it to be easily intercepted, not just by the Ukraine military, but also by journalists or, some nerd on the internet.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we're not intercepting it, but I imagine that a lot of the security agencies are picking that stuff up. I mean, it must be grim being a Russian soldier out here. It's cold. It's really cold. I mean, it goes down. We're on the coast. It's a little bit warmer, but tomorrow night it's going to be -7 at night. So if you're a fairly badly supplied and equipped Russian soldier who's very young and not particularly interested in this war, and you're sleeping underneath your tank somewhere out in a column in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be really demoralizing. You're just not going to want to fight. Yeah. So I think, those sorts of things make it very difficult.
There have been, there's been footage and interviews emerging of Russian soldiers who have supposedly or purportedly been captured or surrendered, talking in terms that are very supportive of the Ukrainian position. Personally, I'd say there are some Geneva Convention stuffs about exposing prisoners of war to that may, in my working knowledge of it, have been breached. Yeah. Do you believe those are genuine, and what effect have they had on the people of Ukraine, do you think? Have they been widely played and aired, for example, on Ukraine media?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, media, social media. Yeah, no, I think they are genuine, and it certainly helps boost morale. And there are definite questions about the breaches of the Geneva Convention and doing that. Yeah, for sure. Every journalist who said that. Yeah.
But could I ask you, Simon, is it your impression that there is as well as a military campaign, a PR hearts and minds campaign being run on behalf of or by Ukrainian authorities, or are what we are getting through our social media feed? What we had, the Angel of Kiev, we had the Go F Yourself, a Russian soldier, we've had the farmers on the tanks capturing the Russian tank. Is that a coordinated campaign, morale boosting campaign, or do you think we are getting a true picture of some of what is happening through the fog of war in Ukraine?
Well, I would always countenance against getting your news from social media.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
I mean, you can't verify the source. So if you have a trusted source, a broadcaster, a newspaper, then I'd go to them and let them figure out whether that stuff is accurate on your behalf, because social media is, so easily manipulated by everybody. And I'm not sure it's a concerted effort by the authorities. I think the people in this country are busy doing it all for themselves. They're putting out that stuff. Of course they are, and the rumors grow and the myths grow and the legends of their great fighters, of course. But I would say they are brave and courageous and determined fighters, and not to be underestimated, which doesn't mean they'll necessarily win, but I can't quite see how they're going to lose either.
That's a very, very interesting comment, Simon, because what inevitably comes after war is peace. It's how you get there. That is, I guess, the unknown, or why you're at war, because no one knows how to get to peace without fighting. We're a few weeks in now. I guess the pessimists and the armchair generals and critics that I've read in columns around the world say, oh, inevitably Putin is just going to put enough pressure on. I have to say I've been surprised that it isn't all over now. This is not Afghanistan, which was over in weeks when the Americans invaded there. I don't know they ever won the war in Iraq, but it was a cakewalk in terms of the major military operational movements there. Could this bog down for months and months?
Putin's in a really difficult position because, if you look at what he did in Grozny and Chechnya, or how he helped Assad in Syria, they just leveled those places. They absolutely pulverized them, and then they brought in a puppet regime. Here, he's characterized this invasion, this war, this special operation, he calls it, as an attempt at liberating the population of Ukraine. He sees himself as the great liberator. So it's very difficult, if you're the great liberator, to flatten the cities of the people that you're liberating. It doesn't follow. So I'm interested to see how he plays that one.
Do you think there is a compromise here
in order to get out of this?
Mm.
Well, I mean, what are they demanding? 3 things, aren't they? The Donbass, Crimea, and that the Ukrainians never join NATO or the EU. I'm not sure they're going to go with those 3 things, and whether we should be rewarding them by giving them the Donbass and saying, yeah, have at it. That's a big question. I think
that would be largely up to the people of Donbass, wouldn't it?
No, it's really up to the Ukrainians. It's their country. It's Donbass is part of Ukraine. So, the secessionary groups, they had a referendum. It wasn't a very fair referendum. And you have to say, well, I mean, in Catalonia, should the Catalonians have been allowed to secede? Where does it end? So at the moment, Donbass is a part of Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government firmly state that's the fact.
Meantime, as I said, economic sanctions, particularly pressure on the oligarchs who support Putin, is massive. We have arms or military equipment flowing into the Ukraine from all points of the compass.
Yeah.
Yeah. What more can Europe, or do the Ukrainians feel Europe and the rest of the world can do for them?
Well, there are calls for, intervention where, you talked about the no-fly zone, and there's certainly requirement, people who are saying don't just have a no-fly zone, actively start attacking, ground forces, tanks, artillery pieces. So, and there's real reluctance for the West to get drawn into that, I think fairly reasonably. So I think keeping the pressure on at every possible point and seeing how that plays out is really the only way of doing that, and continuing to supply them with military hardware. I mean, bearing in mind there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline that has yet to reach the front lines.
All right. The Ukrainian president, has become an international superstar.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing story. TV comedian, actor, becomes president, and now really, for many people, from the comments I read and conversations I have and columns I read, he is absolutely the poster boy for Ukrainian resistance. Is that a mood shared by the people of Ukraine in general?
Everybody loves him. Everyone I've met loves him. Yeah, they think he's great. He's become a kind of sex symbol. He's everybody thinks he's terrific. I mean, most unlikely in some regards. Yeah.
All right. And as far as we know, he is in Kiev and safe.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to doubt that. Yeah, I think he's very determined to kind of stay there, and he's being well protected, I'm sure. Yeah.
Simon, is news media operable, and is local news media operable, television, radio networks, etc.?
Yeah. Yeah, they have really good media here, and they're pretty robust. I mean, this is a country that suffered with a lot of corruption, but they do have a kind of flourishing media, broadcast and print. Yeah, for sure.
What are the plans for you? And an assignment like this is an extremely fluid situation, obviously.
Yeah.
How long do you and your colleagues plan to stay? And at what point do you say, we've got to get out of here?
Well, there's some of my colleagues who probably won't say we've got to get out of here. I think they'll stay on as long as they can, particularly in places like Kiev, where, you know, they're likely to be encircled at some point, and, you know, how they report that and then how they extract themselves from that is going to be quite challenging. And it kind of depends on, you know, you have to call it, you know, as a journalist, you've got to make the call yourself in the end, and the office will listen, or should listen, to what you say, in terms of where you go and how long you remain there. You know, I've covered so many wars, and now, you know, I mean, I don't think I've ever covered a war where journalists weren't actively targeted. Nobody, you know, if you drive through a checkpoint somewhere, as you saw with the Sky TV team, they're not targeting you as a journalist. They'll just shoot anything that comes down that road, whether you're a journalist or not. Make no difference to them. You're just seen as a fair target, so you've got to be pretty aware of that. Yeah.
Simon, it's a long way from Wellington, from St. Pat's Town in Wellington, mate.
Yeah,
Have you got family? Have you got kids?
Yeah, got 3 kids, and families. Yep, well, in London. Yeah.
How does this sort of assignment go down at home?
Yeah, it's challenging for them. I mean, my little girl's 8, and we haven't really told her too much about where I am. And then my older boys, they're men now, and they're concerned, and you have to be reassuring, you know. But they know this is what I do, so I think they're quite proud of me, really.
Simon, for those of people watching and listening to this interview, where can they get your stuff? I'm going to give you the free plug, mate.
On air, yeah. Well, it's the telegraph.co.uk.
Yeah.
And then I'm pushing everything out on Simon Townsley, my Instagram feed, so everything runs on that as well.
Yeah. Simon, I thank you for. What time is it there, by the way, right now?
It's dinner time. Curfew
Dinner
started.
time. Well, I'm gonna let you.
7:30 in the evening. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Simon. Oh, look, no, sorry. One last question.
Go on.
You're not wearing a mask. I haven't seen a lot of soldiers wearing masks. I take it war trumps COVID. There's no mandates. There's no restrictions. The pandemic is over in Ukraine.
You know what? It's really interesting because I've spent the last 2 years flying around the world covering the pandemic, and there's some legacy stuff here. You see a little bit of hand sanitizer around the place. You don't see any masks.
You have a far more clear and present danger to people's lives and well-being.
Well, I think, yeah. I think the Omicron variant is much lighter, and so I think we've moved on from that. Well, a lot of my colleagues got here and got COVID. So
you're kidding me?
No,
but it got through. It had a few days down, and yeah.
No, they landed here and ended up in a hotel room for a week. Very miserable for them.
Yeah. Jeez. Hey, I thank you so much for the work you do and for talking to us, Simon. I hope we can actually do it again as things progress, and I hope you stay safe.
Thank you.
And share a beer sometime.
That'd be nice. Yeah, you can. Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Cheers.
My pleasure.
So there we have it. That is Simon Townsley on assignment for the Telegraph Group, a very accomplished photojournalist. Went to St. Pat's Town in Wellington. How did I get his name wrong at the top of that interview? Anyway, what an insight into what is going there, and actually really interesting for me to find that the impression that I've formed through the media I've consumed is pretty well consistent with what he sees as an observer on the ground currently in Odessa. I thank you for joining us. Should we take off my mistake at the top? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I hope you do watch this, and we will try and talk to Simon Townsley again in the near future from Ukraine. Thank you very much indeed.